Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a video today on how to get into drifting. Now, I didn't really have much for a backdrop, so you're going to be looking at my stairs with really nice shag carpet that matches my dog quite well. But until I can figure out a backdrop, I'm just going to sit on my leather casting couch and tell you how to do things. So I'm going to tell you what I think is the best way to get into drifting. So say your friend just showed you a YouTube video, or say your friend just showed you on Forza how to drift or what drifting is, and you think, damn, this is some pretty dank shit and I want to get into this. So today's video is going to pretty much be saying like what you should do before you end up getting a car. So this is all the research and stuff and prep that you need to do before actually buying a car and actually start drifting. So normally the first thing to do is to just watch a lot of videos of drifting. So just get on YouTube, type in drifting, figure it out. Now if you want a couple different YouTube channels that are a good place to watch good content, and it's not just a bunch of bullshit or just a whole bunch of kids thinking they know what they're doing when they don't. So one good one is always Noriaro. Noriaro, he always knows what the hell he's doing. He's an amazing driver and he always has cool shit to do. Or Offbeat Garage, he is a beginner. So this can show you what a beginner can do, because I think Adele's only been drifting for like maybe 2 years. I think the whole Drift series started like 2 years ago or something. Stewie Bryant, if you want to see some crazy shit, because Stewie Bryant is a ballsy motherfucker. Any of the Sloppy Boy videos, or even Drift Idiot. Drift Idiot's one that you probably should get into if you haven't started watching him yet, because he has a really good log of his very first time drifting till kind of recently, and instead of him fucking bullshitting in front of a camera, he just pretty much just puts words up on the screen, and it's some pretty funny stuff. So once you've watched every single video on YouTube and you're on like the 4th page of your search and you're ready to see this stuff in real life, I think it's about time that you need to go to a drift event. Now, I'm not saying that you need to travel hours on hours to go to Formula Drift. No, the best thing to do is find a local drift day. So something to where it's not something huge, it's not something where people from all different states are coming down. I'm saying try to find a local track that's just having like a little track day where all the local guys come down, they drive all day, test their cars out, do whatever. Try to find one of those events and try to go to one of them. They're super cheap to get into, and you're able to just walk around and watch all the drifting that you want. And also try to talk to some of the drivers. Don't be scared to ask them questions about drifting, especially if you ask them about their car or how they're setting their car up. Trust me, drift guys, if you come up asking a question about their car, they will be more than happy to answer it. So if you start talking to these guys and you find a couple guys that, you know, seem pretty okay with talking to you, ask them for a ride along, because it's good to figure out what the actual feeling of drifting is before you dive into it and put all this money towards it, because who knows, you may not even like it, might not be able to handle like the pressure of drifting, because there's quite a bit of pressure, because at any second you can completely total your car, flip it, or hurt yourself. So some people probably can't handle all of that pressure. So try to get a ride along first, and don't be scared to ask, because people always like the feeling of showing someone else their skill. So if you come up saying like, hey, I'm new to this whole drifting thing and I want to learn more about it, do you think I can get a ride along? Normally they'll be like, hell yeah, I'm gonna show this kid some crazy shit and he's gonna love this and he's gonna start drifting. So let's say you do not have a track near you and you can't travel forever to go to a drift event. That is when you need to start looking for a local scene. What I mean by that is try to find some guys local in your area that are into drifting, and try to find a day that they're either having a car meet or a car cruise or something of that nature, and try to go to one. Ways to find them mostly ends up just being Facebook searching. So pretty much type in whatever city you're in or nearby city and put drift at the end of it. See what pops up, because you never know. There might be a whole community under your belt that you didn't even know about. So finding these Facebook pages or these Facebook groups and stuff could be a very big help. And try to find these guys and meet with them, go to one of their events and talk to all of them and become friends with them. Because having friends that are already into drifting and know what they're talking about, they can help you so much more than just winging it and doing it yourself, because they have advice they can give you. They have bad experiences and good experiences that they can talk to you about, and so they can guide you to a better experience of building or driving a car, other than just trial and error by yourself and say you can't even figure it out. You can always call a buddy and be like, hey, I have this going on, you know, what do I do here? So try to find a local scene. Just try to get into it, because if you see that they're hanging out in a parking garage, or say you're driving past, you see them hanging out in a parking lot at all, just pull in, get out, talk to them, because they're not going to be like, who the fuck is this guy? You need to get the fuck out of here. They're going to be like, you know, like, what's this kid doing? You know, this is kind of weird. But if you go up and you're like, hey, you know, these are guys' cars, you know, like, tell me about them, they're going to be like, oh, you know, this guy's actually pretty cool. He's interested in the cars. So pretty much the whole first step is learn as much as possible. Learn as much about drifting as you possibly can before you start looking into buying anything. So watch all the videos, every single how-to you can find, and learn. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to these new drift guys that you might have just met. Talk to them about drifting. Just talking about it, you will learn so much that you probably never even knew or would have never figured out. So now is when you need to start looking into what you are going to do with drifting. So what I mean by that is there are, let's say, two different types of drifting. There's track drifting and there is street drifting. We're not gonna say competition driving just yet, because you haven't even bought a fucking car yet. Why are you thinking about getting into competitions? So when you're thinking about that, you need to keep a few things in mind. So first of all, say you think streeting is the coolest shit in the world and you just want to be a fucking street shark. Think about your local area, because first of all, you might not even have a single good corner in all of your town, because trust me, I don't. Or there might be a lot of police in your area, so you need to think about, can I really afford a reckless driving ticket? Because trust me, you will get one and they're fucking expensive. So maybe your area is not a very good place to start streeting. Maybe you should start at the racetrack and maybe make your way, if that's what you want to do. Just remember, street drifting is illegal. I'm not one of those guys that's going to tell you how bad street drifting is and how it should not be done, and street drifting should just be banned and nobody should ever do it. I'm not going to tell you to do illegal shit either, so I'm just going to say you'll figure it out. So once you have figured out what you want to do, now it's time to start looking into what car you should buy, because this will become a very long process for you if you don't figure it out now. This is very important. Picking the car that you want to drift is an extremely important part of your drifting career from now on. Because if you pick the wrong car as your first car, it can end up being a bad time for you. So when deciding what car you want to drive, you have to do a lot of research. So let's start naming off a couple cars that you could buy that is a decent car to start drifting in. Now, I'm not going to name off every single rear-wheel drive car that is a cheap platform that could be used very well. Here are a couple. If you have no clue at all what to start looking at, here's a couple. So first one's first, let's get this one out the fucking way. 240 SX. They're cheap, it'll work. Second, Miata. They're really hard to drift, but if you could drift a Miata, you could drift anything, let's just say that. Another one, RX-7. If you don't like your car starting every day, but you want it to look really good, an RX-7 is a very good choice. Or a Mustang. Hell, your dad might already have a Mustang that he will give you. Who knows? Mustangs can drift, you just have to set them up properly. So once you've done hours of research and you've watched multiple YouTube videos and you picked out what car looks the best and you figured out that they didn't come to your country, so you had to settle with something else. Every time. Now it's time to start doing research on that specific car, because when you actually find, if you can find the car that you want to buy and drive, you need to know about the car before you buy it, because you need to know what to look at when you're buying the car, so you don't end up buying a piece of shit like you probably will anyways. So let's say 240. You're buying a 240, what to do? I'm not going to give you a full explanation on how to buy a 240, because no matter what you do, it's not the right choice. But do some research on them before you buy it. So like rust. Say you're in a place that rust is a very common thing, like the Midwest. You need to look at places like the strut towers or the frame rails where they bend down after they come out of the engine bay going down the trainee tunnel. Need to look for rust in specific places, or doing just a simple Google search you could figure out like small issues that the car that you're wanting to buy normally has. So look into that, so when you do decide to buy a car, you don't end up buying something that's so rusty it's going to snap in half, and then you end up getting very upset about it. And also, you might think that a car is really cool and they're very readily available. Check your area's Craigslist, because they're most likely not going to be available. And also, Craigslist doesn't normally have drift cars. Normally people post them in Facebook pages. Like here in St. Louis, we have STL Drift Parts. If you wanted to buy a drift car in STL, that's where you go, because it's nothing but drift people posting drift shit. So cars are constantly posted there. Because if you ever try, I think if you try to type in drifting on St. Louis Craigslist right now, not a single thing will pop up. So it's also really hard to find driftable cars. Now, once you've decided everything, once again, and you're now thinking about what to do next. Now is when you need to decide what you're going to do when it comes to buying and building this car. So 3 things that people normally end up doing is they will buy a completely stock, running, nice vehicle that is driftable and go from there. Or you could buy a kind of pre-built drift car, like something that already has like wheels, coilovers, and a diff. Or you can buy a project shell, which is a terrible idea for your first time. In my opinion, the best thing to do is to buy a stock car, because then you know every single modification that gets done to the car. Buying a pre-built drift car can be cool because it could already have some of the expensive mods already done, like coilovers and whatnot. But then also you gotta think, you're buying a car that's been drifted for who knows how many years. And if it has an imported engine in it, who knows how many miles are on that fucking engine. And if you're thinking about going the Project Shell route, please know what you're getting into. So you figured that out now. So now you've learned about drifting, you know about it, you found a local scene, you found your local drift events, you started looking into cars, you found a car that you like, you figured out how you want to buy the car. What do you do now? Let's go over how to build this car now. Everyone's first thought when building a drift car is, I need horsepower. Nah, fam, you don't need horsepower, because learning with the stock horsepower of whatever car you choose is always the best route to start with. Now, I'm not going to get into why that is. I can make a whole like hour-long video of why drifting with a stock engine is the best to start with, so I'm not getting into that now. I'll do that video on another day. First thing to do is to fix what's wrong with it. Everyone always decides to skip this process and dive straight into coils, wheels, and angle kits, when the entire time they're out there drifting, they're leaking oil everywhere, they're misfiring like a bitch, and there's just issues with their cars because they decided it runs, it's fine, I can drift it, don't worry about it, I'll fix that later. No, fix it now before you start diving into modifications, because say you just spent $1,300 on coilovers and then the next day your fuel pump goes out and you don't know what to do because you're out of money now, and you kind of saw this happening because you realize that your fuel pump's been kind of cutting out and you've been misfiring and having a whole bunch of issues, and instead of just figuring out what that issue was, you decided, let's spend all my fucking money on coilovers. So once the car is a well-driving, starts every day, reliable transportation vehicle, once you've fixed the piece of shit that you bought, now you can go into modifications. Now, first modifications to start looking into, so start pricing out or figuring out if they're even made for the car that you bought, is suspension. Like, suspension is the most crucial part of a drift car, because if your suspension is not either set up well or you're using crappy components, that can really throw off your car and throw off your driving and make you inconsistent. So suspension is very important. So normally, first thing to do is coilovers. Don't cheap out and buy Racelands, please. Best thing to do is try to find used coilovers, but say you have mommy daddy money and they're ready to make it fucking rain on your drifting career, buy nice coilovers. Why not? When you buy the parts you need, buy good stuff so then you only buy it once. Because if you bought ISIS control arms and you keep bending them for some reason and you don't know why, but you just keep buying ISIS control arms, you're going to end up spending more money on that than if you were to put money down on really nice stuff. I'm not talking shit on ISIS products. It was the first brand that came to mind. It's not the greatest stuff, but it works pretty well. Sorry, ISR. But suspension components are a very important part of your car when it comes to drifting. So, coilovers. Just put coilovers on it because that will change the entire car. And you really don't need anything other than that, other than maybe adjustable upper control arms, because that can pull the camber out of your back wheels, makes it to where you're not burning through tires like crazy because you only have this much contact patch. Offbeat actually has a really good video on why having zero camber in the back is a good thing, even if you are low horsepower, so definitely check that out. And so after you figured out what suspension components you're gonna buy for this car that you might build, now the next thing to do is a differential, because you don't think that you're gonna be able to drift with an open diff, because trust me, it's not gonna work. As much as you think it's gonna work, it's not gonna work. Two routes you can go here. There is the I'm a broke kid living in my mom's basement, and then there is the parents fucking making it rain on your drift career, or you have a job and you have money. Say you're broke as shit. First thing to do is to weld it. Weld your diff. It works. It's not the best thing, and it makes cornering, like grip cornering, terrible. It makes daily driving a vehicle terrible because your car's constantly fucking jerking around and making terrible noises. But it works. Welded diffs work. I don't see any problem with a welded diff. Or if you got the money for it, you can go for a nice LSD. So say you're buying a 240 and you have the money for a Nismo diff, do that instead, because it is a lot more comfortable than a welded diff, because there isn't that jerking craziness like weldeds do. Well, at least not as bad as weldeds do. I really like Nismo diffs. They are really nice. So once you decided to weld your diff, don't start looking into angle mods just yet. Angle mods really aren't needed till you have the power to push them. If you have an angle kit for a low horsepower car, the only thing you're using it for at that point is corrections, which if you learn how to drift with stock angle, you're not going to need to make corrections because you'll know how to do it right. So that's a whole nother part of that, like, do it with the stock shit because you'll become a better driver in the long run. I'll make a video on that shit another day. Yeah, you don't need angle. not yet. And if you do get a decent power car, like a strong running SR car or something like that, look into modified stock knuckles, because that is more than enough angle than you'll ever need. But that is pretty much it when it comes to what modifications to look into. Like, it's really not much. Like, coils and a welded diff will get you so far and you don't even realize that. So stop looking at turbo kits and start looking into how to drift videos, because learning how to drift stock engine will always be better in the long run. And I will tell you this now, any normal driftable car, the stock power that it comes with can drift. There's no stock engine that can't drift that's in a practical drift car. So KAs, Miata engines, stock rotary engines, I don't know about 12A, but all the stock engines, you can drift with those very easily. I don't want to say easily, but you can drift with those. You might need to have like 80 PSI in your back tires, but hey, 80 PSI in your back tires is a lot cheaper than a turbo kit, I'll tell you that. So say you made the terrible decision of going the project car route, you need to start looking into what engine to buy. Because since you don't have one, you can pretty much do anything from here. And the decision you make now is going to be very important in the long run. So say, we're just going to keep using the 240 for this video because it's the easiest to talk about. Say you bought a 240 shell and doesn't have an engine, you're starting to look into engines and stuff, and you think, what engine should I buy? And I know exactly what everyone's going to say. LS. No, you don't need an LS. You do not need an LS now. You've never even fucking drifted a car before. Stop looking at LSs. Stop going to the junkyard and looking at 5.3s because you don't need one. Look into KAs. Literally, they're like $200. Like, the cheapest route you could possibly go. And it is the easiest thing you could possibly put in your car because it already belonged there. So look into KAs or SRs. Like, KA and SR, perfect. You don't need anything more than that. Your first drift car, you don't need 500 horsepower. Trust me, a cheap engine that if, say, you're at a drift event all day and it blows up and you're just like, fuck it, you know, and KAs are 200 bucks. That is a lot better than saying, like, I just blew a hole through the side of my, like, I just blew a hole through, like, my $3,000 engine. Fuck. Yeah, just KA is a lot better because you could just seriously sit on limiter and never worry about blowing it up because who gives a shit? They're 200 bucks. You can get it swapped out in a weekend. Just do a lot of research before you decide on what engine you use. So say you just said fuck everything and what everyone says about being a good driver and you're just like, fuck it, I want a 2J. Look into it because hybrid swaps are a lot harder than you think they are, because you could buy that engine swap and everything you need, but nothing's gonna bolt up. Trust me, nothing fucking ever works with putting an engine from one kind of car into a different kind of car, because nothing is supposed to match up because it originally was never supposed to be in the car. So I'm gonna start wrapping this up with telling you something that you need to keep in mind. When you get into this whole drifting scene and you buy a car and you start drifting and whatnot and you start modifying the car, you can easily find yourself getting into what's known as getting lost in the build. This is actually a lot more common than you think. But it's pretty much when somebody starts building a drift car and maybe one day they're just like, you know what, I'm gonna pull my suspension off, you know, the rear end of my car to fix something, and then they pull that off and they're like, fuck it, I'll just fix this while I'm at it. I should fix this while I'm at it. I'll just take this out and fix that while I'm at it. And then you find yourself, your entire car's taken apart, and you have a whole nother year now until your car's back together because you decided to fix all these things that most likely didn't need fixed in the first place. So now you're just kind of screwed because you got lost in what you were doing and now you're way over your head and you really don't know where to go from there. Now that's kind of what I did. I went in too deep. When I should have stayed KA, just got a stronger KA, I decided, I think I snapped a tire rod at a drift event and pulled the car into my garage the next day, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna pull the engine out and put a V8 in it. Why not? And I regret it a lot. I really wish I would have just pulled the car in, fixed the tire rod, and started looking for a less miles, stronger KA. Because that would have been a much better option for me, because you're never going to become a better driver if you don't drive. I have wasted this entire season now because I decided to do this V8 swap and I got lost in the build and I didn't know what I was doing. So I wasted an entire year working on this car when I could have been using that entire year learning how to become a better driver. The idea here is keep your car on the road as much as possible. When building a car or working on an already built car, your goal is to get the car on the road as soon as possible, because the more you drive, the better you'll be. So keep that in mind when deciding on this whole drifting thing or how you're going to do your build. Because if you decide to do this crazy 800 horsepower 2J build, full FD spec car and all this different shit, you're not going to be a good driver because you have horsepower and angle. That's not going to make you a good driver. A good driver is the guy that has thousands of laps on his local racetrack and has been having fun the entire way. So to close things off, finally, one thing you need to burn into your head now when deciding on what car to build, drive, whatever, and how to get into all this is if it doesn't run, you can't become a better driver. Just remember that. But that pretty much finishes it for today. I really don't know how informative this video is going to be, but some people just don't know where to start. And I wanted to just give somebody a foot in the door to getting into this, because as much as drifting is a terrible financial mistake, it's the best decision I've ever made. So, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm going to try to do more stuff like this, teaching you guys more about drifting or some other random ass thing I can think of. Until the next video, enjoy yourself.